Secretary General of the Jammu Kashmir International People's Alliance, for this invitation to speak and participate at this conference today in Geneva. It is always a pleasure and an honour to have the opportunity to express my views and observations on a situation which has now become very dear to my heart, and that is the human rights abuses suffered by the people of Kashmir in the occupied territories of Pakistan and indeed India. However, today the focus is on the Pakistan-administered territories of Kashmir, namely Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Gurk, and I am a barrister and senior counsel from Ireland. I am also a former national chairperson of the Irish Red Cross, and today I am speaking in my personal capacity. For over 7 decades now, the people of Kashmir have been subjected to persecution, oppression and injustice, no matter on which side of the line of control they live. This is now my 4th conference dealing with these issues, and I am learning all the time. And I know that many of you here are very well aware from your own experiences and from that of your families of the injustices and human rights deprivations to which the people of Pakistan-administered Kashmir have been subjected by their occupying force. It is already well documented in 2 excellent reports of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, dated the 14th of June 2018 and the 8th of July 2019 respectively. Whilst I'm not going to go into either report in detail as they are widely available, what is significant is that in the latest report in 2019, it concluded that neither India nor Pakistan have taken any concrete steps to address the concerns raised in the earlier report. In particular, the earlier report highlighted the fact that people living in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, as well as Gilgit-Baltistan, are deprived of a number of fundamental human rights, particularly in relation to freedoms of expression and opinion, peaceful assembly and association. Some examples of human rights abuses include the fact that anti-terrorism laws continue to be misused to target political opponents as well as the civil society activists. Nationalist and pro-independence political parties claim that they regularly face threats, intimidation and even arrests for their political activities from local authorities or intelligence agencies, and that threats are also often directed at their family members, including children. Citing specific cases, the report also notes how journalists in Pakistan-administered Kashmir continue to face threats and harassment in the course of carrying out their professional duties. The report also says that the UN Human Rights Office has received credible information of enforced disappearances of people from Pakistan-administered Kashmir, including those who were held in secret detention and those whose fate and whereabouts continues to remain unknown. It seems that there are fears from victims groups that people subjected to enforced disappearances from Pakistan-administered Kashmir may have been detained in military-run internment centres in Pakistan. At this juncture, I would like to pay tribute to the work of Mr. Munir Mangal, who has highlighted the plight of all the people who have disappeared in the Pakistan province of Balochistan. I was present as an observer for part of a conference on this issue last week in Geneva, and I wish to extend my sympathies to all families who have lost their loved ones in such horrible circumstances. The Pakistan government has in reality control over the affairs of Azad, Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. There are reports that local people in Gilgit-Baltistan have been forcibly displaced to make way for China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Under Part 7.2 of the Interim Constitution of Azad, Jammu Kashmir of 1974, and I quote, "No person or political party in Azad, Jammu Kashmir shall be permitted to propagate against or take part in activities prejudicial or detrimental to the ideology of the state's accession to Pakistan, The same constitution bars anyone from public office and prohibits them from participating in politics unless they publicly support the principle of Kashmir acceding to Pakistan. A Supreme Court lawyer in Azad Kashmir, his name is Shamsad Hussain Khan, has stated, and I quote, "The document referred to as the Constitution of Azad Kashmir is a sham, a biased document. These laws and practices are in contradiction to the pledges made by the government to the international community and the United Nations. Such laws and practices are also in contravention of international standards on the right to freedom of expression, opinion, assembly, and association. Pakistan is a signatory to the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, and these rights must be upheld. All major civil and police administrators' positions in AJK are held by Pakistani civil and military officers. The territory's local representatives are excluded from the Pakistan Parliament and those Pakistani bodies that negotiate intra-provincial resource allocation and federal taxes. Stringent blasphemy laws means that many religious groups face the death penalty if they are even accused of denigrating the Prophet. The rights of women are governed by the offence of zina, the enforcement of Hudud Ordinance of 1979 penal provisions, which prevent women from exercising their marriage choices. According to Human Rights Watch, the Pakistani government repress democratic freedoms, muzzle the press, and practice routine torture within Azad, Jammu, and Kashmir. However, awareness is one thing, but I am in the business of finding solutions. It is time that we had a solution to this unacceptable conflict, which has been neglected by the international community and the Western media. The United Nations and the Security Council have failed to provide a resolution to this conflict. It is now the longest running, unresolved conflict in the history of the United Nations. I come from a country, Ireland, which found a solution to a decades-long conflict, which had resulted in the deaths of many citizens, innocent civilians. This solution is known as the Good Friday Agreement, because it was signed on Good Friday on the 10th of April of 1998. At that time, Ireland was a single geographical entity, but politically, legally, and administratively divided. One part was, and still is, the Republic of Ireland, and the other part, the northern part, was ruled directly from the United Kingdom. Following the Good Friday Agreement, Northern Ireland got a devolved government and assembly where elected members from different political parties can share power. There are many other aspects to this agreement, and indeed it is still an ongoing process. I know that I have mentioned this before, but I believe it is important to reference it in the context of this international conference. The Good Friday Agreement was a resolution mechanism involving two sovereign governments and a number of political parties, and provided for a referendum plebiscite in both parts of Ireland. Essentially what it did, and this is very important in the context of Kashmir, was that it was a process that recognized the principle of consent. In other words, that the exercise of the right to self-determination is based upon the principle of consent, freely and concurrently given. Therefore, Ireland can only become a united country if the majority of people in a referendum say so. It is widely considered that this agreement brought peace to a decades-long conflict in Northern Ireland and establishes an important precedent in international diplomacy. Now, this is one of many international precedents which could be very useful in moving forward to find a solution to the problems of Kashmir. I do not accept the often quoted view that the resolution of the dispute in Kashmir is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. Human rights are never a bilateral issue. They can only be an international one. It is not possible that two powerful and competing nations, who each want the entirety of this homeland, will ever agree to a peaceful solution alone. They each want the whole cake that is Kashmir. It is about resources. Neither is prepared to share with the other, and both are oblivious and impervious to the rights of the Kashmiri inhabitants, and in particular their right to self-determination, at least at the moment. Perhaps that will change. Now, with regard to the issue of self-determination, as many of you will be aware, the right to self-determination is enshrined in Chapter 1, Article 1 of the Charter of the United Nations. In Article 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and Article 1 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. It is now well placed in the framework of international law and diplomacy. So what I consider is required now is an international commission comprising lawyers, jurists, experts in plebiscites, and the International Court of Justice, sponsored by the United Nations and under the auspices of the United Nations, to meet, discuss, and make recommendations on a number of aspects as follows. 1. To prepare a report and formulate the appropriate question or questions seeking an advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, which is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, on the legality and lawfulness of the original Treaty of Accession by the Maharaja Hari Singh to the state of India, and the invasion by the Pakistani government in 1947, the two actions which have resulted in de facto control of Kashmir by these two superpowers, together with the issue of the right to self-determination versus the issue of state sovereignty, to which the UN has, in my view, given undue deference to date. It is interesting to note that Joseph Corbell, the original Czech member of the United Nations Commission for India and Pakistan, was of the view that Resolution 47 of the Security Council bound the parties only morally and not juridicially. The Security Council, in his view, treated the problem as a political one only, without any reference to the legalities of the situation. Corbell was of the view that the Security Council could have requested the International Court of Justice to give an advisory opinion on the legal issues. I agree with him, which is why I have given it as my recommendation for a solution. One of the questions for consideration by the court could be whether the original plebiscite proposal to allow only two options for the people of Kashmir, namely accession to either Pakistan or India, was inadequate as failing to provide for a true right of self-determination pursuant to the UN Charter, which would have given the people of Kashmir a third option, namely the right to choose independence and be a sovereign and independent state. What effect, if any, would that have on the original resolution then or now? That and other questions being answered by the International Court could provide important clarity to the backdrop and landscape of this intractable problem, helping to forge a pathway to an acceptable solution. Whilst opinions of the court are not binding, as you all know, they carry great legal weight and moral authority. To do nothing means that our grandchildren will be here, sitting in this room in 70 years' time, dealing with the same issues, which may have become much worse. So who will join with me in finding such a solution? Who in this room today who is interested in pursuing this or indeed any other solution with me? If so, please contact me. after this conference, and I would be delighted to talk to you about it. I think it is time to put some kind of plan in place to end the suffering of the Kashmiri people. I want to emphasize that I am neither pro or anti-Pakistan. I am neither pro or anti-India. I have wonderful friends in both countries. I only care about justice and fairness, and my concern is for the people of Kashmir at this time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We are